The scratching of the pen against the legal document sounded loud in the silent courtroom, like a shovel hitting dry earth. Grant Westwood didn't just sign his name, he flourished it. He capped his gold fountain pen, looked at the woman he had vowed to love for eternity, and let a cruel, satisfied smirk curl his lip. He thought he had won. He thought he was walking away with the family empire, the penthouse, and his freedom to be with his mistress. He thought his wife, Eudora, was defeated. But he didn't see the thick, dusty envelope sitting on the corner of Judge Pendergast's bench. He didn't know that the ink on his divorce papers was the exact trigger needed to activate a dormant clause in a dead man's will. The smirk was about to be wiped off his face forever. Room 402 of the Superior Court of Manhattan smelled of lemon polish and stale anxiety. Outside the tall windows, the grey New York skyline loomed, indifferent to the destruction of a 10-year marriage taking place inside. Grant Westwood adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit. He glanced at the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, a gift from his late grandfather, Arthur Westwood. 10:14 a.m. Perfect. If this wrapped up in the next 15 minutes, he could make his noon reservation at Le Bernardin with Lydia. Lydia. Just thinking of her made Grant feel a rush of adrenaline. She was everything Eudora wasn't. Fiery, demanding, and dangerously exciting. Eudora, sitting at the opposing table, looked like a ghost. She wore a simple navy dress, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She hadn't looked at him once since they entered the chambers. "Mr. Westwood," Judge Pendergast said, his voice gravelly and impatient. He was an older man with bushy white eyebrows and a reputation for hating time-wasters. "You understand that by signing this decree, the dissolution of your marriage is final. There is no cooling-off period past this point." "I am fully aware, Your Honor," Grant said, his voice smooth and confident. "My attorney has explained the ramifications. I am ready to move on." Grant's lawyer, a shark named Derek Salinger from the firm Salinger and O'Connell, nodded smugly. They had crushed Eudora in the mediation. The prenuptial agreement Grant had forced her to sign a decade ago was ironclad, or so they believed. She was leaving with a small settlement, enough to rent a modest apartment in Queens, while Grant retained the Westwood ancestral home in the Hamptons, the portfolio, and the controlling shares of Westwood Industries. "Mrs. Westwood." The judge turned his gaze to Eudora. "Are you prepared to sign?" Eudora looked up. Her eyes were rimmed with red, but her hands were steady. She didn't look at the judge. She looked directly at Grant. For a second, Grant felt a flicker of unease. It wasn't the look of a broken woman. It was the look of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. "I am ready." She picked up the pen. Grant watched the tip of the pen touch the paper. "Do it," he urged silently. "Sign it and set me free." She signed. Eudora Marie Westwood. The moment the pen lifted from the paper, Grant let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. A smirk, involuntary and sharp, cut across his face. He caught Eudora's eye and didn't bother to hide it. It was a look that said, "I won. You lose. You were nothing but a placeholder." "Done," Grant said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "If that's all, Your Honor, I have a board meeting to attend." It was a lie, of course. He had champagne on ice at the Plaza Hotel. "Sit down, Mr. Westwood," Judge Pendergast barked. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. Grant froze, halfway out of his chair. "Excuse me." "I said, sit down," the judge repeated, his eyes narrowing behind his spectacles. "We are not finished. The court acknowledges the dissolution of the marriage. You are now legally divorced. However, The court has been in possession of a sealed document that was, by specific instruction, to be opened only immediately following the legal finalization of a divorce between Grant Westwood and Eudora Westwood, should it occur within 10 years of the death of Arthur Westwood. Grant frowned, slowly sinking back into his leather chair. He looked at Salinger. His lawyer looked equally confused, shuffling through his papers. "My grandfather?" Grant scoffed, forcing a chuckle. "My grandfather died 8 months ago. His will was probated. I inherited the estate. This is irregular." "The will you probated was the public will," the judge said, reaching for a thick manila envelope that had been sitting unobtrusively under his gavel. "This is the codicil of morality, filed with the State Supreme Court 3 years ago, with instructions to be revealed only by a presiding judge in family court." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eudora remained perfectly still. She didn't look surprised. "What is this nonsense?" Grant demanded, his arrogance slipping. "I am the sole heir. I am the only Westwood left." "Silence," Pendergast ordered. He broke the red wax seal on the envelope. The sound of the tearing paper was agonizingly loud. Grant's heart hammered against his ribs. His grandfather, Arthur, had been a ruthless businessman, but he had also been a man of terrifyingly rigid principles. He had loved Eudora. He had often told Grant that Eudora was the best thing to ever happen to the Westwood family. But surely the old man wouldn't reach out from the grave to interfere with his life now. The judge unfolded the document. It was handwritten. "I, Arthur J. Westwood, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this document to supersede all previous allocations regarding the Westwood Trust and the Hamptons estate in the event of a marital dissolution," the judge began reading. Grant gripped the arms of his chair. His knuckles turned white. "If my grandson, Grant, divorces Eudora for any reason other than her infidelity or abuse, proof of which must be absolute, then the distribution of my assets shall be re-evaluated based on the character clause." "Character clause?" Grant shouted, jumping up. "This is insane! I contest this!" "Sit down or I will hold you in contempt," Pendergast roared. Grant sat, but his mind was racing. Lydia! He had been so careful. He hadn't been caught. Eudora had divorced him, citing irreconcilable differences. He had bullied her into that generic filing to protect his reputation. He thought he was safe. "The clause reads as follows," the judge continued, his voice dropping to a somber tone. "I built this empire on integrity. If my grandson abandons the woman who supported him when he was nothing to pursue a life of vanity and dishonor, he proves himself unworthy of the Westwood legacy." The judge paused and looked over his glasses at Grant. "Mr. Westwood, did you initiate the separation?" "Technically, yes," Salinger, the lawyer, interjected. "But it was a mutual agreement." "I didn't ask you," the judge snapped. He looked at Eudora. "Mrs. Westwood, or Ms. Montgomery, as you may now prefer. Did you want this divorce?" Eudora stood up slowly. Her voice was clear, ringing with a strength that hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. "No, Your Honor. I fought for our marriage for 2 years. I wanted to work it out. But Grant found someone else." Grant's blood ran cold. "Objection! That's hearsay. She has no proof." "Actually," Eudora said, reaching into her tote bag. She pulled out a small, black USB drive. "I didn't use this during the divorce proceedings because I just wanted out. I wanted peace. But if Arthur's will requires the truth..." She walked forward and placed the USB drive on the judge's bench. This drive contains dated geotags, hotel receipts, and photos from a private investigator regarding Grant's affair with a Ms. Lydia Banks, dating back 18 months. While Arthur was still alive, Grant felt the room spin. The smirk was gone. In its place was the dawning, horrifying realization that the trap had snapped shut, and he was the one caught in the steel teeth. To understand the sheer magnitude of the collapse Grant was experiencing, one had to understand the man he believed himself to be. Grant Westwood was 34 years old. He was a man who believed the world functioned on a transactional basis. You give something, you get something better. He had married Eudora when he was 24. Back then, the Westwood Company was struggling, recovering from a recession that had nearly wiped out his grandfather's liquidity. Eudora wasn't a socialite. She was an actuary. She was brilliant with numbers, safe, and fiercely loyal. She had spent the first 5 years of their marriage balancing the company books, working late nights with Arthur, and stabilizing the family fortune. Grant had respected her then. She was useful. But as the money returned, so did Grant's wandering eye. He grew bored of Eudora's pragmatism. He grew tired of her dinners at home and her disinterest in the flashy galas he loved. He wanted a trophy. He wanted Lydia Banks. Lydia was a PR consultant for a rival firm. She was blonde, laughed at all his jokes, and constantly told him he deserved more. More fame, more luxury, more excitement. "You're a king, Grant," Lydia had whispered to him 6 months ago in a suite at the Four Seasons. "And a king shouldn't be tied down to a peasant." That phrase had stuck with him. A peasant. That's how he had begun to see Eudora. A relic of the hard times, something to be discarded now that the sun was shining again. Grant had planned the divorce with military precision. He had moved assets offshore, or so he thought. He had pressured Eudora, gaslighting her into believing she was the one making him unhappy, that she was suffocating him. When she finally cracked and agreed to the separation, he felt like a genius. Now, sitting in the courtroom, that genius felt like an idiot. "I need a recess," Grant stammered, his face pale. "I need to speak to my counsel." "Denied," Judge Pendergast said coldly. He was plugging the USB drive into his laptop. "This hearing is to execute the final stipulations of the divorce and the probate. We are not in a trial. We are in an execution of a legal will." "But I didn't know about this," Grant yelled. "This is an ambush." "It is a test," the judge corrected, without looking up from the screen. "A test you failed the moment you signed those papers with a smile on your face." The judge clicked a file. On the large monitor, mounted on the wall for evidence display, a photo appeared. It was high resolution. It showed Grant and Lydia on a yacht in the Mediterranean. The timestamp was from last July. "July," the judge noted. "Arthur Westwood died in August. This photo was taken while your grandfather was on his deathbed, Mr. Westwood. Were you not supposed to be in London for business?" Grant couldn't breathe. He remembered that trip. He had told Eudora and Arthur he was meeting investors. Instead, he had blown $50,000 on a week-long cruise with Lydia. "The dishonesty is established," the judge said, clicking the mouse again. Another photo. Grant kissing Lydia outside a jewelry store in Soho. "The infidelity is established." The judge closed the laptop. He picked up the handwritten will again. The codicil continues. "Should my grandson be proven unfaithful or the instigator of a divorce against a faithful wife, the following asset redistribution takes immediate effect." Grant's lawyer, Salinger, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. He leaned over to Grant. "We are screwed, Grant. If this will holds up in state court—" "Shut up and fix it," Grant hissed. "Item 1, the judge read, his voice booming. "The Westwood estate in East Hampton, valued at $24 million, is to be transferred immediately to the sole ownership of Eudora Montgomery." "What?" Grant shrieked. "That's my house. My cars are there. My life is there." "Not anymore," Eudora spoke up. Her voice was cool, detached. She looked at him with an expression that cut deeper than anger. "Pity. You can pick up your personal effects. I'll give you 24 hours. Item 2, the judge continued, ignoring Grant's outburst. "The controlling interest in Westwood Industries, specifically the 51% share block previously held by Arthur Westwood, is hereby placed into a trust." "A trust?" Grant grasped at the straw. "I control the trust." "No," the judge said. He smiled, a thin, wintry smile. "The trustee is to be the person Arthur deemed the only one with the brains to run it. The shares are placed under the stewardship of Ms. Eudora Montgomery until such time as she sees fit to designate a successor." The silence that followed was absolute. Grant felt his knees give way. He slumped back into the chair. The company, the house. It was all gone. "This can't be real," Grant whispered. "Grandfather wouldn't do this." "He knew Grant," Eudora said softly. Grant looked at her. "What?" "He knew about Lydia," Eudora said. "He hired the investigator." "Not me." Grant stared at her, his mouth agape. "Arthur called me to his bedside 2 days before he died," Eudora continued, tears finally welling in her eyes. Tears for the old man, not for her marriage. "He told me you were going to break my heart. He told me you were weak. He gave me the USB drive. He told me to wait. He said, 'Let him hang himself, Ellie. Give him enough rope. And if he's the man I fear he is, he'll sign his own death warrant.'" You set me up," Grant accused, his face turning red. "I gave you a choice," Eudora replied. "I asked you to go to counseling. I asked you to work on us. You laughed at me. You told me I was pathetic. You chose this, Grant. You signed the paper." "And the final item," the judge interrupted, clearly enjoying this. "The liquid assets, the cash accounts totaling roughly $12 million. Grant looked up, a glimmer of hope. Maybe he could start over. 12 million was enough. "Are to be donated," the judge read, "to the Second Chance Shelter for Domestic Recovery, in the name of Eudora Montgomery." "No!" Grant slammed his fist on the table. "That's my inheritance. I am the blood heir." "You are the divorced ex-husband," Judge Pendergast said, closing the file. "And according to this document, you are entitled to the sum of $1. I suggest you don't spend it all in one place." The judge banged his gavel. "Court is adjourned." Grant stood there, shaking. He looked at Salinger, who was already packing his briefcase, eager to distance himself from a now destitute client. He looked at the judge, who was disrobing. Finally, he looked at Eudora. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and picked up her bag. She didn't look back. She walked out of the courtroom doors, the heavy wood swinging shut behind her, leaving Grant alone in the silence of his own destruction. But the story wasn't over. Grant Westwood was not a man to accept defeat gracefully. As he stood in the empty courtroom, the shock began to fade, replaced by a burning, toxic rage. He pulled out his phone. He had to call Lydia. He had to figure out a way to kill this will. He had to destroy Eudora. He dialed Lydia's number. "Hey, baby," Lydia's voice purred on the other end. "Did you sign? Are we rich?" Grant swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Lydia, there's been a complication." "What kind of complication?" Her voice sharpened instantly. "I need you to meet me." "Not at Le Bernardin. Meet me at the apartment. We need to talk." "Grant, what happened?" "Just meet me," he shouted, and hung up. He stared at the phone. He had nothing left but his anger and a woman who loved money more than him. He was about to find out just how loyal Lydia really was. And Eudora. Eudora was about to find out that a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. Grant Westwood's luxury apartment in Tribeca was a testament to his ego. It was all chrome, black leather, and floor-to-ceiling glass. He had rented it 6 months ago as a love nest for him and Lydia, paying the exorbitant lease with company funds disguised as housing allowances. When he unlocked the door, the smell of expensive perfume hit him. Lydia Banks was lounging on the Italian leather sofa, scrolling through her phone, a half-empty bottle of crystal champagne on the coffee table. She looked up, her blue eyes sparkling with greed. "Well?" she asked, not bothering to stand up. "Did you pop the cork on the old ball and chain? Are we officially the owners of the Hamptons estate?" Grant didn't answer immediately. He walked to the wet bar, his hands trembling slightly, and poured himself a triple scotch. He downed it in one burn. "Grant?" Lydia sat up, the smile fading from her perfectly painted red lips. "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Did she refuse to sign?" "She signed," Grant rasped, turning to face her. "She signed everything. So what's the problem?" "The problem," Grant said, his voice rising, "is that my grandfather was a vindictive, manipulative old bastard." He threw his suit jacket onto the floor and loosened his tie. He began to pace, the alcohol doing little to numb the panic clawing at his throat. He explained it all. The hidden will, the morality clause, the investigator, the photos. As he spoke, Lydia's face transformed. The seductive warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, hard mask. She stood up slowly. "Wait," she interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Are you telling me you lost the house?" "Yes." "And the company?" "Most of it. Eudora controls the voting shares." "And the cash? The 12 million? Grant flinched. "Donated to a charity." Lydia stared at him for a long, suffocating moment. Then she laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was a dry, mocking sound. "You idiot!" she spat. "You absolute, incompetent moron." "Hey!" Grant stepped forward. "Don't talk to me like that. I was blindsided." "You were outplayed," Lydia screamed, throwing her champagne flute against the wall. It shattered, raining crystal shards onto the pristine carpet. "By a housewife. You told me she was stupid. You told me she was a doormat. And now you're telling me she walked away with my future." "It's not over," Grant said, trying to sound authoritative, though he felt small. "Salinger is looking into appeals. We can contest the will. We can argue mental incompetence on my grandfather's part." "And how long will that take?" Lydia demanded, hands on her hips. "Years. Who is going to pay for the lawyers, Grant? You? With what money? You have $1. I still have my salary. I'm still the VP of operations." "For how long?" Lydia sneered. "Who owns the company now? Eudora. Do you think she's going to keep you on the payroll? She's going to fire you before the ink is dry." Grant froze. He hadn't thought that far ahead. He assumed his position was secure because he was a Westwood. But Eudora held the reins now. Lydia grabbed her purse, a Birkin bag that Grant had bought her with his bonus last year. She started walking toward the door. "Where are you going?" Grant asked, panic surging. "Lydia, don't leave. We're in this together." "Together?" She spun around. "I was in this for the lifestyle, Grant. I didn't sign up to date a broke loser who gets outsmarted by his ex-wife. I have options. Real men. Men who can actually close a deal." "Lydia, please!" Grant grabbed her arm. "I can fix this. I swear I can fix this. I know where the bodies are buried at Westwood Industries. I know things Eudora doesn't. I can blackmail the board. I can destroy the stock price if they don't settle with me." Lydia paused. She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his desperate, sweating face. She was a survivor, a predator in high heels. She calculated the odds. If she left now, she had nothing. If she stayed and Grant managed to sabotage the company or force a settlement, there might still be a payout. Plus, she hated losing, and Eudora winning felt like a personal insult. "Let go of me," she said calmly. Grant released her. "You have one chance," Lydia said, her eyes narrowing. "If we are going to get that money back, we can't just rely on lawyers. We need to play dirty. Dirtier than your grandfather." "What do you mean? Eudora is the saint, right? That's her angle. The faithful, perfect wife." Lydia paced the room, her mind working fast. "So we need to tarnish the halo. If she's unfit to run the company, the board will revolt. If she's unfit to hold the assets, the will can be challenged on character grounds for her. She's squeaky clean, Lydia. She knits and volunteers." "Everyone has a breaking point," Lydia hissed. "We need to push her. We need to make her look unstable. We need to sabotage her leadership at the company so spectacularly that the shareholders beg you to come back." Grant's eyes lit up. This was a language he understood. Sabotage. Manipulation. "There's a massive merger coming up next month," Grant said, his voice dropping. "The tech acquisition in Austin. Grandfather set it up, but I've been managing the details. Eudora doesn't know the specifics. If that deal tanks, Westwood Industries loses 30% of its value overnight." "And who can save it?" Lydia asked, raising an eyebrow. "Me," Grant smirked. "Only me." "Then do it," Lydia commanded. "Make her fail. Make her look like a disaster." "And Grant?" "Yeah?" "If you fail again," she said, opening the door just a crack to look back at him, "I won't just leave you. I'll make sure the IRS finds out about those offshore accounts you thought you hid so well." She slammed the door, leaving Grant alone in the silence. He wasn't heartbroken that she threatened him. Strangely, it made him respect her more. They were two wolves in a corner, and now they were hunting the same prey. Monday morning at Westwood Industries was usually a quiet affair. The headquarters, a 40-story tower in midtown Manhattan, hummed with the efficient, low-energy buzz of corporate routine. But today, the atmosphere was electric. Whispers shot across the open-plan floor like sparks. "Is she actually coming? I heard she fired the VP. I heard she owns everything." At 9 a.m. sharp, the elevator doors on the executive floor chimed. The reception staff held their breath. They expected Grant, perhaps storming in to clear his desk, or lawyers. Instead, Eudora walked out. She wasn't wearing the soft cardigans or floral dresses she used to wear when she brought lunch to Arthur. She was wearing a tailored navy blue power suit that fit her like armor. Her hair was blown out straight, sharp and glossy. She carried a leather portfolio, not a purse. Behind her walked a short, stout woman with glasses. Joyce, the head of the archival department. Joyce had been ignored by Grant for years, considered a dusty relic, but Eudora knew that Joyce knew where every skeleton in the company was buried. "Good morning," Eudora said to the stunned receptionist. "Please inform the board that I will be starting the meeting in 10 minutes, and have security disable Mr. Grant Westwood's access pass immediately." Yes, Mrs. Westwood. I mean, Mrs. Montgomery," the receptionist stammered. Eudora marched down the hallway toward the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. She could feel the eyes on her. She knew what they were thinking. She's just a wife. She doesn't know business. She took a deep breath. She had spent the last 10 years playing the role of the supportive spouse, but before that, she had been top of her class in actuarial science. She had managed the books for Arthur when his eyesight failed. She wasn't just a wife. She was the architect of the safety net that had caught Grant every time he fell. She pushed open the doors. The board of directors was already seated. 6 men in grey suits. The chairman, Preston Caldwell, looked up. He was 60, arrogant, and had been Grant's golfing buddy. "Eudora," Preston said, not bothering to stand. "This is highly irregular. We weren't expecting you to actually show up. We assumed you'd want to appoint a proxy, someone with experience." "Good morning, gentlemen," Eudora said, her voice steady. She walked to the head of the table, Arthur's chair. She didn't sit. She stood behind it, gripping the leather backrest. "As the majority shareholder and trustee, I am the proxy. Now listen here, dear." Another board member, a man named O'Malley, spoke up. "Running a conglomerate isn't like organizing a charity gala. We have volatile markets. We have the Austin Tech merger. You can't just waltz in here and... The Austin Tech merger is overvalued by 15%. Eudora cut him off. The room went silent. "Excuse me." Preston frowned. Eudora signaled to Joyce. The older woman stepped forward and distributed a stack of files to each board member. "I spent the weekend reviewing the due diligence reports," Eudora said, her voice gaining strength. Grant was pushing for this merger because he was promised a kickback from the tech firm's CEO in the form of consulting fees to a shell company in the Caymans. The tech is outdated. If we buy them, we inherit $20 million in bad debt. Preston flipped through the file, his face paling. These numbers. Where did you get these?" "I read the footnotes, Preston," Eudora said coldly. Something Grant never did. "As of this morning, I have paused the negotiations. We are pivoting to acquire the smaller, more stable logistics firm in Jersey. It's less flashy, but the ROI is solid." The men looked at each other. They were stunned. She wasn't just speaking their language, she was correcting their grammar. "I also noticed," Eudora continued, leaning forward, "that the budget for executive entertainment has ballooned by 200% in the last 18 months. Private jets to Cabo, dinners at Per Se, jewelry purchases listed as client appreciation gifts." She looked directly at Preston. "Did you enjoy the golf trip to St. Andrews last month, Preston? The one charged to the marketing research account?" Preston coughed, loosening his complicit in Grant's draining of this company. "I suggest you resign before the auditors find you." The power dynamic in the room shifted instantly. The air of condescension evaporated, replaced by fear. Just then, the boardroom doors banged open. Grant Westwood stood there. He looked disheveled. His tie was crooked, his eyes wild. Security guards were behind him, looking apologetic. "You can't do this!" Grant shouted, pointing a finger at Eudora. "You can't just lock me out of my own building." "Mr. Westwood," Eudora said, her voice dropping to a terrifying calm, "you are trespassing." "I am the Vice President of Operations," Grant roared, storming toward the table. "I built this deal. Preston, tell her she's insane." Preston looked at Grant, then down at the file Eudora had given him, the file proving Grant's fraud. Preston was a survivor. He knew which way the wind was blowing. "Grant," Preston said quietly, "you should leave." "What?" Grant stopped, stunned. "You're siding with her. She's a nobody. She's just a bitter ex-wife trying to ruin me." "She's the owner, Grant," O'Malley added. "And based on these files, she's right about the Austin deal." "The Austin deal is a gold mine," Grant screamed. "I have it all set up." "We know how you set it up," Eudora said. "We know about the kickbacks." Grant's face drained of color. He looked at Eudora. For the first time, He didn't see the woman who used to mend his socks. He saw Arthur. He saw the same steel in her spine that his grandfather had possessed. "You stole my life," Grant hissed, venom dripping from every word. "You tricked the old man." "I saved this company from you," Eudora replied. She turned to the security guards. "Please escort Mr. Westwood out, and ensure he takes nothing from his office. Personal items only. No hard drives, no files." Two burly guards stepped forward. "Sir, please come with us." Grant shook them off. He straightened his jacket, trying to regain a shred of dignity. He looked around the table, seeing only averted gazes. "You'll regret this," Grant said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can run this place? You'll burn it to the ground within a month. And when you do, I'll be there to buy the ashes for pennies." "Goodbye, Grant," Eudora said, turning her back on him to look at the projection screen. Grant turned and walked out, the sound of his footsteps heavy. But as the doors closed, Eudora didn't see the look on his face. It wasn't just defeat. It was the look of a man who had just decided that if he couldn't have the castle, he would blow up the foundation. Inside the elevator, Grant pulled out his phone. He texted Lydia. "Phase 1 failed. She knows about the Austin kickbacks. She's smarter than we thought." A moment later, Lydia replied. "Then we stop attacking her business sense. We attack her heart. Did you plant the device?" Grant smiled. Before he had stormed into the boardroom, he had made a quick detour to the server room. He still had his old passcodes memorized, and IT hadn't wiped them yet. He hadn't just come to yell. That was a distraction. He had installed a keystroke logger on the main executive server. "It's done," Grant typed back. "Good," Lydia replied. "Now we wait. Every email, every password, every secret she types is ours. Let her feel comfortable. Let her think she won. Then we leak everything." Grant pocketed his phone as the elevator hit the lobby. He walked out onto the street, the sun blinding him. He had lost the battle, but the war was just beginning, and unlike Eudora, he had nothing left to lose. Back in the boardroom, Eudora's hands were shaking beneath the table. She gripped her knees to stop the trembling. Confronting Grant had been the hardest thing she had ever done. "Are you all right, Ms. Montgomery?" Joyce whispered, leaning in. Eudora took a deep breath. She looked at the empty chair where her husband used to sit. "I'm fine, Joyce," Eudora said, her voice firm again. "Let's get to work. Item 2 on the agenda, the restructuring of the legal department." She didn't know that miles of digital cable beneath her feet were already carrying her private login credentials to a laptop in Lydia Banks's apartment. The karma the judge had spoken of was swinging its pendulum, but Grant was trying to grab it and swing it back. 3 weeks had passed since the boardroom coup. To the outside world, Westwood Industries was thriving under Eudora Montgomery's leadership. The stock had stabilized, the risky Austin merger was officially dead, and the new logistics acquisition was already showing profit. Eudora was being hailed by Forbes as a revelation. But in the shadows, the knives were being sharpened. Grant Westwood sat in Lydia's apartment, a stark contrast to the penthouse he was used to. He was currently living out of a suitcase. Eudora had followed through on her promise. She had evicted him from the Hamptons estate and cut off his corporate credit cards. He was burning through his personal savings, which were dwindling faster than he cared to admit. "She's glowing," Grant muttered, staring at the television. A news segment showed Eudora cutting a ribbon at a new community center funded by the company. "Look at her. She's pretending to be Mother Teresa." Lydia walked in from the bedroom, wearing a silk robe. She didn't look at the TV. She looked at her laptop. "Stop whining and come look at this," she commanded. Grant walked over. On the screen was a stream of emails. The keylogger works perfectly, Lydia said, a wicked grin spreading across her face. I have her passwords. I have her schedule. I have access to the internal accounting server. Did you find anything? Grant asked eagerly. Is she skimming? Is she incompetent? Lydia's smile faltered slightly. No, that's the annoying part. She's clean. Painfully clean. She works 18 hours a day. She approves every expense personally. She's actually doing a good job. Grant kicked the leg of the table. I knew it. We have nothing. We have access, Grant, Lydia snapped. If you can't find dirt, you make mud. She began typing furiously. Here is the plan. The annual Westwood Charity Gala is this Friday. It's the social event of the season. All the shareholders, the press, the mayor, everyone will be there. It's Eudora's big debut as the face of the company. And that is when we strike, Lydia said. I've been using her credentials, which, thanks to your little device, look exactly like they are coming from her computer, to set up a series of wire transfers. Grant leaned in, watching the numbers on the screen. Transfers to where? To a shell company in Panama that I set up yesterday, Lydia explained. I've drafted a series of emails from Eudora's account authorizing these transfers. The subject lines are incriminating. Things like hide the funds and off-the-books payment. I've timed the transfers to execute at 8 p.m. Friday night, right in the middle of her speech. So it looks like she's embezzling, Grant realized, a slow smile returning to his face. Not just embezzling, Lydia corrected. Stealing from the very charity she claims to love. The Second Chance Shelter. The money is moving from the charity account to the offshore shell. Grant let out a low whistle. That's evil. It destroys her professional reputation and her moral standing in one shot. The character clause in the will. If she's proven to be a thief, the trust dissolves. Exactly, Lydia said, closing the laptop with a snap. And who is the only Westwood left to pick up the pieces? You. The next few days were a blur of nervous anticipation. Grant bought a new tuxedo on one of his last remaining credit cards. Lydia bought a dress that screamed victory. Friday night arrived with the humidity of a storm brewing over Manhattan. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Temple of Denda was bathed in soft, golden light. Waiters in white jackets circulated with champagne. Eudora stood at the entrance, welcoming guests. She wore a stunning silver gown that made her look like a statue come to life. She was smiling, shaking hands, looking every bit the matriarch of the empire. Grant and Lydia arrived late. They hadn't been invited, of course, but Grant still knew the security chief at the door. A quick $100 handshake and a "don't worry, we're just here to pay respects" got them in. Enjoy it, Lydia murmured, checking her 1,000 horse. Enjoy it, Lydia murmured, checking her watch. 7:55 p.m. The automated leak I sent to the Financial Times and the New York Post just went live. The wire transfers trigger in 5 minutes. Across the room, phones began to light up. It started as a ripple. A reporter near the back checked his notification. Then a board member. Then the whispers started. The gentle hum of conversation turned into a frantic buzz. Grant watched the room turn against her. He saw Preston Caldwell, the board chairman, look at his phone, turn pale, and look at Eudora with horror. "It's happening," Grant said, his heart pounding. At 8 p.m., Eudora tapped her microphone. The room didn't go silent out of respect. It went silent out of morbid curiosity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eudora began, her voice amplified through the vast hall. "Thank you for coming. Tonight is about integrity. It is about building a legacy that—" "Integrity!" a voice shouted from the crowd. It was a reporter from the Post. "Ms. Montgomery, can you explain the $2 million that was just wired from the charity fund to a Panamanian account under your signature?" Eudora froze. The crowd gasped. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, looking genuinely confused. "We have the emails," another reporter yelled, holding up a tablet. "Leaked 10 minutes ago. Emails from your private server authorizing the theft." Grant decided this was his moment. He set his drink down and strode into the center of the room, Lydia trailing behind him like a shark in the water. "Grant," someone whispered. "Grant is here." Grant walked right up to the stage. He looked up at Eudora, who was gripping the podium, looking pale and terrified. "Eudora," Grant said, his voice projecting clearly. "I tried to warn the board. I tried to tell them you weren't equipped for this. But stealing from battered women, even I didn't think you'd stoop that low." "Grant," Eudora whispered, her eyes wide. "What is going on?" "The gig is up," Grant announced, turning to the crowd. "I am sorry, everyone. My grandfather made a mistake. He trusted the wrong person. But I am here to fix it. I will freeze these accounts immediately. I will take control." He looked at the board members. "I think we can all agree. The experiment is over. Reinstate me, and I'll save the company from this criminal." The room was heavy with tension. Flashbulbs popped blindingly. Eudora looked like a deer in headlights. Grant felt the familiar weight of the crown returning to his head. He had won. For 10 seconds, the only sound in the massive hall was the clicking of camera shutters. Grant Westwood stood tall, chest puffed out, waiting for the applause, waiting for the security guards to drag Eudora away. But the guards didn't move toward Eudora. They moved toward the exits, sealing the doors. Eudora's expression shifted. The look of confusion and terror evaporated instantly. She stood up straighter. She let go of the podium. She reached into a clutch and pulled out a small remote control. She clicked it. The large projection screen behind her, which had been displaying the charity logo, flickered. The image changed. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a video feed, a grainy black and white recording from a webcam. Grant turned to look at the screen. His stomach dropped. The video showed a living room, Lydia's living room. It showed Lydia sitting on the sofa in her silk robe and Grant standing next to her. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. The audio boomed through the museum speakers. "We have access, Grant. If you can't find dirt, you make mud." The crowd gasped. On the screen, Lydia continued. "I've drafted a series of emails from Eudora's account. The subject lines are incriminating. I've timed the transfers to execute at 8 p.m. Friday night." Grant felt the blood drain from his body. He spun around to look at Lydia. She was frozen, her mouth open in a silent scream, her face a mask of absolute horror. Eudora leaned into the microphone. Her voice was no longer shaky. It was the voice of a judge passing a death sentence. "You're right, Grant," Eudora said calmly. "Grandfather did teach me a lot. But the most important thing he taught me was, if you suspect a rat, don't chase it. Put down cheese and wait." This is fake," Grant screamed, his voice cracking. Deep fake! AI! It's not AI. A new voice spoke. From the shadows behind the stage, a man stepped forward. It wasn't a lawyer. It was a man in a windbreaker with a badge hanging from his neck. Special Agent Miller, FBI, Cybercrimes Division, the man announced. Grant stumbled back. FBI? We've been monitoring your connection for 2 weeks, Mr. Westwood, the agent said, walking down the steps. Ms. Montgomery alerted us the moment her security team detected the physical keylogger installation on the server. We told her not to remove it. We wanted to see what you would do with it. Eudora stepped down from the stage, walking slowly toward Grant. The crowd parted for her. You installed a device on a corporate server, Eudora said, her voice quiet but carrying through the silent room. That's corporate espionage. Then you accessed my private accounts. That's identity theft. Then you wired money across international borders. She stopped inches from him. She was shorter than him, but in that moment, she towered over him. That's wire fraud, Grant, and money laundering. Federal crimes. Lydia! Grant turned to her, desperate. Lydia did it. She typed it. I just watched. Lydia's eyes went wide. You coward! You told me to do it. It was your plan. We have the audio, folks, Agent Miller said, signaling his team. We know exactly who did what. You're both going away for a very long time. 2 agents moved in on Lydia. She screamed as they cuffed her hands behind her back, her expensive dress bunching up awkwardly. She was dragged away, kicking and cursing, calling Grant every name in the book. Grant stood alone. The board members, the ones he thought would welcome him back, looked at him with pure disgust. Preston Caldwell shook his head and turned his back. Eudora, Grant whimpered, tears streaming down his face. Eudora, please. I'm family. I'm a Westwood. You can't let them take me. Eudora looked at him. She thought about the 10 years of marriage. She thought about the smirk on his face when he signed the divorce papers. She thought about the cruelty he had shown her when he thought she was weak. You are not a Westwood, Eudora said softly. Arthur Westwood was a man of honor. You are just a thief with a last name you didn't earn. She turned to the FBI agent. Take him. Eudora! Grant screamed as the cuffs clicked onto his wrists. The cold metal bit into his skin. I'm sorry. I'll sign anything. I'll leave the country. Please! The agents didn't listen. They hauled him toward the exit, past the rows of stunned socialites, past the cameras that were capturing every second of his downfall. As he was dragged out the heavy double doors of the museum, the cool night air hit his face. He saw the flashing lights of the police cars. He saw the back of the squad car waiting for him. And just before they shoved his head down to put him in the back seat, he looked back at the museum. Through the glass doors, he saw Eudora. She wasn't watching him. She had already turned back to the podium. She was apologizing to the guests, composing herself, continuing the work of the charity. She had forgotten him already. Inside the squad car, the reality set in. There would be no penthouse, no mistress, no company, no legacy. The hidden will had taken his money, but his own greed had taken his freedom. Grant Westwood leaned his head against the caged window and wept. 5 years later, the sound of rain hitting a window pane used to be one of Grant Westwood's favorite sounds. In the penthouse, high above the city, rain meant a cozy evening with a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir and the city lights blurring into abstract art. Here, at the Otisville Federal Correctional Institution, rain just meant the yard was closed. It meant the smell of damp concrete and unwashed bodies would be stronger in Block C. Prisoner 74922-B sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the grey wall. At 39, Grant looked 50. His hair, once thick and styled with expensive product, was thinning and grey at the temples. The stress of the trial and the grim reality of a 12-year sentence for wire fraud and corporate espionage had hollowed him out. He wasn't the Wolf of Wall Street anymore. He was just the guy who cleaned the cafeteria floors on Tuesdays. "Hey, Westwood," a voice grunted from the bunk above. It was Sal, a former union boss serving time for racketeering. "Move your legs. I'm coming down." Grant pulled his legs in, obediently. In prison, he had learned the hard way that arrogance was a liability. The first month, he had tried to use his last name to gain favor. That had earned him a broken nose and a week in the infirmary. Now, he kept his head down. "Mail call!" a guard shouted, walking past the cell bars. He tossed a single envelope onto Grant's bed. Grant picked it up with trembling hands. It was a standard white envelope. No return address. But he recognized the handwriting. It was from his mother, a woman who lived in Florida and barely spoke to him anymore. He opened it. There was no letter, just a newspaper clipping. Grant unfolded the crinkled paper. It was a page from the Wall Street Journal. Westwood Industries reports record profits. CEO Eudora Montgomery named Businesswoman of the Decade. Grant felt a physical blow to his chest. He stared at the photo. Eudora. She looked magnificent. She was older, yes, but she wore her age with a grace he had never possessed. She was standing on the steps of the New York Stock Exchange, ringing the opening bell. Beside her was a tall, kind-looking man with salt and pepper hair. Thomas Reed, the architect she had married 2 years ago. Grant read the article, his eyes burning. Under Montgomery's stewardship, Westwood Industries has not only recovered from the attempted embezzlement scandal of 2021, but has redefined corporate responsibility. The Arthur Westwood Trust now funds 20 shelters nationwide. When asked about the secret to her success, Montgomery quoted her late father-in-law, "True wealth is what you have left when the money is gone." Grant crumbled the paper in his fist. When the money is gone. He had nothing left. Lydia Banks had taken a plea deal, testifying against him to shave years off her sentence. She was currently out on parole, working as a waitress in a diner in New Jersey, her reputation in PR obliterated. She had sent him one letter a year ago. It had just said, "I wish I'd never met you." Grant wished he could say the same. But the truth was darker. He didn't regret meeting Lydia. He didn't regret the affair. He regretted losing. He regretted that he hadn't been smarter, faster, crueler. He was still the same man. He hadn't learned Arthur's lesson, and that was his true punishment. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, forced to watch the woman he discarded soar to heights he could never reach. Meanwhile, in the Hamptons, the air was crisp and salty. Eudora Montgomery walked along the shoreline, the Atlantic Ocean crashing against the sand. The old Westwood estate stood proudly on the dunes behind her. She had renovated it, removing the cold, museum-like quality it had during Grant's tenure. Now, it was a home. There were tricycles in the driveway for her nieces and nephews. There was warmth. She stopped and looked out at the horizon. She thought about that day in the courtroom, the smirk, the signature, the fear. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Penny for your thoughts?" Thomas walked up beside her, wrapping a warm blanket around her shoulders. He was a good man. He didn't care about the Westwood fortune. He had his own successful practice. He loved Eudora for her mind, her laugh, and her resilience. "I was just thinking about Arthur," Eudora said, smiling. "I visited his grave this morning." "Did you bring him his favorite?" Thomas asked. "A single white rose and a copy of the quarterly report." She laughed softly. He would have hated the font we used this year, though. Thomas hugged her from the side. You saved his legacy, Eudora. You know that, right? I didn't just save it, Eudora whispered, looking back at the house. I earned it. She thought about the character clause in the hidden will. At the time, she had thought it was Arthur's way of punishing Grant. But over the years, she realized it was Arthur's way of protecting her. He knew she would try to be fair. He knew she would try to give Grant the benefit of the doubt. The will forced her to see the truth, that some people are simply toxic, and the only way to deal with them is to cut them out completely. Come on, Thomas said, kissing her temple. The kids are asking for s'mores, and I have no idea how to work the fire pit without burning the deck down. Eudora laughed, a genuine free sound that carried over the wind. I'm coming. She turned away from the ocean, away from the past. She walked back toward the house, toward the light spilling from the windows, toward a life built not on schemes and deception, but on the solid rock of integrity. Far away, in a concrete cell, the lights flickered out for the night. Grant Westwood lay in the dark, listening to the rain, finally understanding that the check he had signed that day in court had cost him far more than he could ever afford to pay. The smirk was long gone. Only the silence remained. And that is the story of how a single signature, driven by arrogance, unraveled an entire life. Grant thought he was signing a divorce paper, but he was actually signing a confession. He underestimated two things: the wisdom of his grandfather and the strength of the woman he betrayed. It's a powerful reminder that while lies might get you to the top floor, only character keeps you there. Arthur Westwood's hidden will wasn't just a legal document. It was a final test of morality. Grant failed, Eudora passed, and as the old saying goes, karma has no menu. You get served what you deserve. What do you think? Was the punishment too harsh, or did Grant get exactly what was coming to him? And if you were Arthur, would you have given Grant a second chance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and betrayal, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this with a friend who loves a good drama. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.